So we're on Facebook Live. Welcome everybody and thank you for your time. We have quite an important topic to discuss today and we'd like to thank Zain Bulbulia who really inspired us to look at this topic. We are talking about children, school learners in particular, and how they are coping during this time of the pandemic. We would like to talk about psychosocial behavior and wellness. We want to talk about mental health. We want to talk about what government is doing to ensure that learners are having a good experience, notwithstanding the challenges of COVID. And so we have some specialists and some friends and some experts and some farmers and some parents and some teachers and some professors who are all part of this wonderful conversation, because all of us really are there for the well-being of our children, for the learners. We want to make sure that they will be able to cope and move on, and that hopefully this pandemic will be behind us at some point and life will continue with or without a mask. And that we'll ask Kat about in a short while. But I want to start right now with our wonderful learner who has taken the time. I know it's a little bit late for you to be with us, but we so appreciate that you are with us. Please tell us your name, the school you're at, and your age, and then tell us about your experiences in the last year.
Evening, everyone. My name is Kishalia. I go to Springvale Primary and I'm 13 years old.
Wow.
My experience with COVID-19 and schooling has been quite difficult, especially with having a mask on and being in grade 7. Teachers are trying to introduce new concepts and new subjects to try and help you for high school, and trying to learn with a mask on and trying to answer questions and for the teachers to teach with a mask on has been extremely difficult. Um, Before COVID had happened, we had all been in a routine going to school every day. Um, and now, due to going to school every second day, it's like kind of changed the routine and it's been a bit difficult. There has been a lot of fear going out of your house, going to school, going to work, and a lot of social interaction has changed. There's a few kids who have now shifted to online schooling, and their social interaction has changed because they aren't interacting with students and friends and teachers. With family wise, you are at home now and parents are working from home. Before you would be home, come home from school, your parents would come home and you'd have dinner together. But now with them working at home, I think it's been a bit more. They're working longer hours, and there's not a lot of time that they have to spare. At my school, Springvale Primary, they take the protocols very seriously. Every day there is a booklet that needs to be signed by our parents saying that we have no COVID symptoms and that we are safe to come to school. Before entering our classroom, we sanitize and take temperatures to make sure that everyone is safe. And before we leave school, we sanitize our workspace just so that for the next class that comes the next day, it's safer for them. During the first lockdown, it was a bit difficult to keep busy and interactive. Some ways that we kept busy was playing family sports or watching like movies and having a movie night or game night with family. And just like with friends, obviously you cannot interact with friends anymore. You could basically go on a Zoom meeting with them and talk to them or have like a movie night with them. It wouldn't be the same as interaction, but it's how we have to cope. With schooling, when the first lockdown happened last year, we were fully online and we'd have Zoom meetings with our teachers, and we'd have our work emailed to us so we could do our work. But now we are back at school, and I think for me, it has been much easier to be in the class and interacting with our teacher and our students. Just online, it's not the same
I
for
think
me.
we might have just frozen there. I think both of them are frozen. Is everybody else okay?
I can see them fine. Maybe they're frozen now.
Yes. Okay.
Is it better now?
It's better now, my darling. You were saying that
Okay.
now it's much better.
Now it's much better for me because there's interaction with your teachers and students, and it's online, it's not the same. So for me, I feel it's better online.
And you feel better going to school?
Yes.
Are some of the children maybe a little, do you think that there's fatigue, that they might have issues?
There is quite a bit with, especially like going to school. Some students are feeling quite anxious being in a classroom, and it is quite difficult. But I think everyone is good at school. Everyone is feeling that it's better to be interacting with friends and being like in school rather than online.
Thank you so much. And so we are now going to ask the teacher who's going to give us a wonderful perspective around the triangle. I'll leave that to you, Salo. Thank you.
Thank you, Firdaus. Thank you for having me on the show. Hello to all the guests on the show. And it's good to see you. It's good to see you again. So I'm going to touch on the triangle. That's your educator, the pupil, and the parent. I'm going to touch on the salient points because of time constraints. So I'll start with the educator. Like you mentioned earlier on, our lockdown started in March last year, on the 18th of March. And we had a 21-day lockdown, and that was extended for schools. So the kids only came back in late June, which means we missed out quite a bit of the curriculum, which we call in South Africa our ATP, our annual teaching plan. And that caused anxiety for the teachers, and it was trimmed thrice, I think, by a basic education. So we had to then teach the trimmed curriculum. When it came to the teachers, it was difficult to teach with a mask. It still is difficult to teach with a mask because you sometimes cannot be heard by the learners, and teachers are anxious in moving around in the classroom to check on learners. I think, yes, there we are. So you can see that's our grade R class. They have their masks on. And we've had grade R children testing positive at 4 years old, 4.5 to 5 years old. So it wasn't easy for the teacher. Then I'm going to come to the learner. With the learners, they are anxious. They have this fear. Also, learners are social beings. They want to interact with their friends. They forget that they cannot hug their friends. And they too find it difficult wearing the mask. In South Africa, I'd like to mention it's mandatory to wear the mask. So they find it difficult to interact in the lessons, to answer questions. There's no more group work. There's no more teamwork. They're missing their sport. You know, with society, we don't touch on death. It's a taboo subject. We don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it. So for the first time, learners are facing death in the face. They've lost parents. They've lost siblings. They've lost friends, uncles and aunts, grandparents. So they are in a state of shock because this is what you hear and see all the time if you watch the news or on social media. Then with the kids at the school that I am in, for the team, they come from a low socioeconomic background. So they don't have access to internet. They could not do home schooling at home. They could not do online lessons. So our government as such and basic education as such has to look into that and see how best we can cater for these children, because there is no balance then. Some schools are having lessons done at home, and our learners, this is where the teachers were bogged down with work and are now suffering from burnout, because they had to then make booklets to send it home to the learners so they can work at home. And teachers had to work after school, during the weekends, and during the holidays. And then it is difficult because you don't have that personal contact with the learner. So that is what the learners and the teachers faced. And then we come to the parents. I think parents are quite in a state of a shock because they didn't realize how much it takes to teach that learner in the school and in the classroom. So now they see the volume that is being done in school curriculum-wise. And with the parent also, they're also suffering from fatigue because they're working from home, most of them. And it's a full day's work, and then you got to take care of your child's schooling, because we work in groups, group A and group B, and they come to school on alternate days. So the day that the child is not coming to school, the parent has to make sure that that is like a normal school day for that child at home. And I think that's the anxiety that they're going through. With teachers and with learners at school, in the school situation, now that they're back on alternate days, there's anxiety, there's fear. A simple thing like a child coughing or sneezing in the class causes that anxiety and the fear. So that is something that is, I would say, leading to that mental fatigue of this virus, because it's so long drawn now. So we have to look at new ways and new methods of changing the picture that we had for teaching in schools, and change it and change the colors, splash around, play around with methods and ideas to make it exciting for the children, because they cannot have breaks like they used to normally have. We call it now a mask break, where they go out for 10 minutes, take off the mask and relax a bit, but under supervision and monitor the teacher because of social distancing. So it's very difficult because humans are so used to human contact. I spoke to a grade 1 teacher, and she said she's saddened because they little children, they like to be hugged. They like that human touch. They like that human contact, and they're not getting that. So they can't understand what is happening. So we have to now look at ways and means of how we're going to do this. And that's where I loved your Wazi World show, Fidos, because it helped so much with our learners, because it's not an adult telling them, you have to sanitize, you have to wear your mask, you have to social distance. It was a cartoon character, and they related to it. So we used that at school. We used Wazi World a lot at school. So thank you so much for that. But yes, the pandemic has caused a lot of mental strain, a lot of mental fatigue. We have to think out of the box now, be more innovative, be more creative in how we're going to get curriculum across to the learner.
Wow, thank you so much. That really paints quite a deep and broad picture for all of us and the realities of it all. Nosheen, we invite you now. We've got some slides that Justine will show, and you can talk to your slides. You're going to give us, I think, both a government perspective, but also your own experiences. So let's show the slides, please, Justine.
Hi, and thank you, Firdaus, for inviting me this evening. First of all, I think it's such an appropriate topic, considering that we are in our 3rd wave in South Africa, and the numbers are spiking. I must say, and I hope I'm pronouncing the young lady's name correct, Kaishalia and Sello has really set the foundation to my conversation this evening, because they've touched on so many of the aspects that I'm going to speak about. I am going to speak from a specialist point as well as a parent's perspective, because I believe that that is important for me to do. And as I go through my presentation, you'll hear why I'm saying that I'm going to speak from my experience as a mom with a disabled adult, and a 16-year-old, and what they are experiencing as two siblings in the house. So psychosocial well-being or mental health for me is very multidimensional and it's holistic in nature. And everything that Kaishalia has mentioned is what exactly makes up this well-being. She spoke about socialization. She spoke about emotions. She spoke about cognition. She spoke about physical and spiritual well-being, and Salo touched on that as well. And these all influence a child and a person and how they function to reach their full potential. It compromises of feelings of hopefulness, positive social relationships, and being able to cope with challenges through the use of appropriate skills, which they normally have. But with COVID-19, this has been compromised. Now, as we move on, onto my next slide, there's been a need for specific interventions when more serious and more emotional challenges have arose due to a child being or an adult being formally diagnosed with depression or anxiety, which are becoming more prevalent during COVID-19 among children, youth, and adults. And I think you've been hearing that on social media, on TV, wherever you hear, this is what's happening at the moment in our country and all over the world. The mental health of the bulk of our population is important, but there's an additional challenge that arises amongst learners with disabilities. And that's where I want to just stop for a moment and focus on, who often cannot express their needs for support. My eldest daughter is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And I must tell you, in COVID-19, she has been experiencing severe anxiety and separation anxiety to the effect that she gets a panic attack when I leave the house, and if not even leaving the house, when I go into the shower, this is what happens to her. She doesn't speak, but she's very vocal. When we were hit with COVID-19, she became extremely quiet, very, very quiet. She has a sleep disorder where she literally does not sleep at night. She walks around from room to room. Now, this is a child that is nonverbal. I have a friend that has an autistic child as well. Since COVID-19 has been pulling out chunks of her hair, not because of a medical problem that her hair might be falling out, it's because she's experiencing anxiety and stress. So how do we manage this with a sector of individuals that are disabled? And not much is being said about this group of children. I also have a 16-year-old daughter, and children react differently. And the other day, she burst into tears. And Selo mentioned it, the fear of death. I said to her, Rania, why are you so upset today? Because she's actually a very vocal, very focused child. And she said, Mom, I'm so scared of going to school and contracting the virus and bringing it home. What if Laika gets it and she dies? That is huge. That is extremely huge. For someone where we generally talk about things, she's hearing things, but look how she has expressed how she feels about COVID-19. So the situation in the country is far more complicated than I think we in. With the increase of unemployment that adds to the stress and anxiety, the high rate of poverty, gender-based violence, and all forms of prejudice. Pre-COVID-19 psychosocial issues were being addressed at different levels, and not perfectly, but however they were addressed. Now with COVID-19, it deprived people of basic components that we've been speaking about related to psychosocial behavior. The issue of loss, which Selo again spoke about, and grief has reached mammoth proportions. Every conversation that you have with any person is about who has died. Adults are finding it difficult to cope. Can you just imagine what young children and youth are going through? Professionals are looking at more creative solutions to provide support. And currently, what are we offering at school? So the Department of Education has enhanced their partnerships with Childline from a rapid response perspective. Childline has a call center which all schools are aware of and all children should have. The South African Depression and Anxiety Group, which provides a 24-hour depression and drug abuse intervention program. It's online, it's done 360 days a year. And then of course the Teddy Bear Clinic has come on board, providing not only home visits, but are able to assess the situation and then further refer out to psychologists and psychiatrists for further assessments. Now, as we do know, we are very short of psychologists in our country, specifically in Gauteng. We have 4 psychologists per district that covers over 300 schools. In some of our schools, we have counselors and we have social workers, but not all our schools and not all our schools. We have, at the moment, what we have in some parts of our schools are crisis intervention programs where child and youth care workers are deployed to assist school-based support teams to identify and support learners that are experiencing anxiety. Learner support agents at various schools, again, not all schools. It is a peer support program. As you know, children learn from other children or other youth, and they are trained in basic skills to support youth. Each case should really be assessed and intervention should be provided on an individual basis. Where possible, intervention should be conducted to learners in their home language. And I can't stress the importance of using your home language. And that is so key for me. For teachers that are experiencing exactly what children are experiencing, and each day that goes by, they are losing their family members, they are losing colleagues. There is the employee assistance program. And they are not only burdened with the fact that there's COVID, they're overburdened with catching up a curriculum. They are told that they have to catch up a curriculum here, and how are they to do it with so many emotional issues? And then, of course, trying to ensure that the matriculants cover a certain curriculum to be able to write that exam at the end of the year. If we move on to I think it's my last slide. The concern with children with disabilities, like I said, is very close to my heart. In most cases, it's done through observational skills and a holistic view of the situation is needed. Parents and teachers have to work from a process of elimination. And that is what's so key here, is that there is no book, there is no way. There's just the process of eliminating what is going on with your child that is nonverbal. And through that elimination, you get to the root of what's causing that problem. And it takes sometimes longer than what it should. With children who are disabled, who can express themselves, it is important to provide the correct means of communication. For example, a child that is deaf, a WhatsApp platform or person who is proficient in the mode of communication, for example, South African Sign Language, needs to be accessible for them. The intellectual level of the child needs to be considered, as well as their needs, the terminology that you use with them, and the language. Parental workshops for me is so important, and I shared that earlier on with Zane to say that we really need to go down to where the parents are, and it needs to be done on a platform where people can access this, because this workshops are not obviously going to happen for a long time, but how do we reach our parents that are sitting in a situation where they really don't know what to do with their children, and especially their children that are disabled? To end off, I'd like to say the responsibility would be to ensure that these programs, both in schools, are operational, sustainable, and accessible within schools and communities for all families and children who are struggling in all areas, for example, with grief and other psychosocial issues. COVID-19 is creating new standards of what is normal. The question is, how do we sustain it? How do we sustain all this that we are talking about? Because right now, I think we are all experiencing some form of psychosocial issues. And on that note, I'd just like to say thank you. Thanks, Firdaus.
Thank you, Nosheen. Wow, that's also quite thorough. Thank you so much. we'll go now to Catherine. Welcome from Ohio. So I suppose the secret, Catherine, is that I was in Ohio in 2002, I think it was, when I did my master's, and we were all students there, and it's wonderful to connect with you again. Justine, are we able to pull up those photographs? Because I love seeing it today, just to see OU in some way, even if it was just in images. So welcome, Catherine. Please tell us who you are, what you do, and why we have pictures of a farm and farming.
Thank you for those. Welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me today. So my name is Catherine Kutcher. I'm a university administrator and professor at Ohio University, but I'm also a mother. And I think my role here today is to share what I've observed as a parent and farmer and a teacher as well with my students and with my children over the last year. So I'm going to focus on, what my children have been doing, what we've been doing at the farm. If you don't know what this is a picture of garlic scapes, which are the undeveloped buds of a garlic flower. We just harvested these last week, and I posted this picture on Facebook. And one of the things that we have done as a family during this last year is really investing in our farm and focusing a lot of attention on growing food and on teaching our children about how to grow food and to be a little bit more self-sufficient. They're not always happy about the work that we do, but we really appreciate being in a beautiful community and in a pretty rural location, especially in a time that required physical distancing from other people. So these are some dishes that I made recently. This is a potato. I'll tell you what this is. This is halloumi cheese that's fried with some cherry tomatoes and oregano and balsamic vinegar. The previous slide was a picture of a kale salad that we made with some of the garlic scapes, some mushrooms, tomatoes, peppers, a little bit of shrimp or prawns that you see there, and some avocado. So we're really trying to get our kids to eat a more plant-based diet. And, like most children, they don't want to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. They want to eat a lot of sweets and candy and carbs. And we're really trying to encourage them to eat healthier. This is our potato, view of our potato garden right now. We have 5 rows of 2 different kinds of potatoes, Kennebec and Yukon Gold. And we also are growing watermelon, squash, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, garlic, and a few other crops mixed in there. Did I mention cucumbers as well? So this is a 36-acre farm in Meigs County, Ohio. We also raise animals. Here are 2 pigs that we adopted. They were born last October at a neighbor's farm, and we've been raising them. Our children named them Moonlight and Spark and Snowflake. And we have, really enjoyed this time of being together on our farm as a family. We've also set up, when last year summer we went into lockdown and we couldn't send the children to school or any camps, and so we set up a campsite and developed a pond on our property and some wilderness survival skills, and also spending a lot of time swimming, kayaking, grilling out, things like that. So yeah, it's been a really wonderful time as a family, I think, for us to be on the farm and definitely to reflect on, the privilege that we have to have this property and have this environment that we live in. I will echo some of the comments that the previous speakers shared about the experiences of schooling during this time. My children and I were on spring break last March of 2020, and the lockdown started in Ohio, and we were informed that we wouldn't be going back to work or school, and we thought that would be a temporary situation, and it ended up lasting about a year. And we didn't return to finish the school year. We finished it with packets that were delivered home, or I had to go pick up from the school. And so students were doing a lot of worksheets and things like this. And, you know, that was really difficult. And then we didn't have any camps or any activities for the children during the summer. I was still working full-time online as a university administrator and professor. So I was really living that life of trying to be a parent and a homeschool teacher, but also supporting the teachers in their work at the school, making sure that my children met their deadlines, and then also, you know, doing all the work that I needed to do. And my children stayed online during the first term of this academic year. We start in August. They were online from August until this March. And then the school decided to go back to a hybrid format in the second and third terms, but we decided to keep our children home because the school was still providing online learning for families that chose that. And I felt it wasn't safe because the children were not vaccinated. The COVID cases were rising. We've had 5,000 cases in our county, which is a very rural county, just in the last year. And so we decided to keep them home. And I'm glad that we did that, although it was difficult. They did go back in person in the fourth term of school. And so they went back from like mid-March until May. And we decided it was necessary for them to go back because we were starting to see a lot of behavior changes, a lot of fear and anxiety and depression setting in, some regression. And we talked to the children and they decided they really wanted to go back and that the benefits outweigh the risks. And, you know, we do have vaccines now in the United States, and I have been vaccinated and my husband has, and many people have at this point, but children under 12 still cannot get vaccinated, and the tests are still being conducted, and there have been some setbacks even in those tests. So we're still not sure when children will have access to vaccines. Also, there's been a lot of misinformation and fear about the vaccines in the United States. So even though we have access, there are many people choosing not to vaccinate, or a lot of vaccine hesitancy among people in the US. This thing has become very politicized, and I'm sure you've read about that. But that's been really disappointing and challenging for us as a nation, is how do we promote vaccines when so much of the world is still not even having access. One thing I've noticed with my children is, you know, we have this really great balance of living on a farm and having access to healthy foods and playing outside. We have a pod of families in our community that we have grouped with, and so they have friends that they could play with throughout this time. We also have homeschoolers in the community, so it's not completely unknown to them to learn from home, but they really did miss going to town, going to school. I missed going to work and seeing my students. And my daughter's experience with fourth grade was a little different from my son. He was in kindergarten. The fourth graders did a lot of things through Google Classroom. They had to check their email every day. At first, she had multiple teachers who were teaching on Zoom and also posting assignments through Google Classroom. And this was really overwhelming for a 9-year-old child because, you know, she was feeling a lot of fatigue, a lot of overwhelm and stress at having to complete all of these assignments and manage communication with multiple teachers. It was really things that I wasn't doing until I was in college, right? Or even later than that. So I think that the expectations of the kids was really high, I think. And also the expectations on the teachers to deliver a curriculum in the midst of a pandemic was also, I think, overwhelming for everyone. Also, the social isolation was really difficult. And my daughter, I did allow her to get on the Facebook Messenger for Children. And so she did have some interaction through social media with her friends. I never thought I would allow a 9-year-old to have a social media account, but it was really a lifesaver for her because she was able to text and do video calls and keep up with her friends online. And that's what I was doing too. So I felt like that was fair. For my kindergartner, you know, he had a different experience. They did not do online schooling for kindergarten. They did not give out the tablets or laptops for that age group. And so he just had worksheets that we would pick up packets every 2 weeks. And, you know, I am a educator. I'm a university administrator. I have a PhD, but I do not know how to teach a kindergartner how to read. And this was really challenging for us. We also realized that it's not just about reading and writing and arithmetic, but kindergarten is really about social and emotional learning and the physicality of playing with other children. And he really missed that. And he had been in preschool before, so he knew what that was like. And he really, really missed being with other kids in school. So, you know, I'm just really grateful that we had a pod and we had other children and families that we could interact with. I will also say that one of the challenges we faced this year was the digital divide. And even in a country as developed as the United States, you will be surprised that in rural communities like where we live, we still don't have access to the grid or to the internet networks that people have in towns and cities. And that has really come to a head this year. And, you know, internet is very privatized in the US. Access to media is very privatized. So that has been a real challenge for us. And, you know, even though we pay to have satellite internet, a lot of families don't have that kind of access. So I'll just end by saying, you know, this past year has been both a blessing and a curse. We are lucky that we are healthy, that none of us in our family got sick with COVID. And we spent a lot of time together as a family, and we have a really great place to live. We played a lot of games together. We watched a lot of movies together. We had a lot of fun cooking and doing all of this. But, you know, it was also a real challenge. And right now, I'm really grateful that my kids are able to go back to camps. They are going to a watershed camp this week. They're doing environmental education camps, swimming, arts and crafts, things like this. But the kids are also burnt out and they're saying, why do I have to go learn stuff? I just want to stay home. It's summer vacation. I just want to stay home and relax. And I'm realizing that they too are feeling a lot of the fatigue and the burnout that us adults are feeling. So I'm trying to also balance it with time, just relaxing at home. So yeah, I'll stop there. I will say that, you know, I could also share some insight about university education and what students are experiencing, but maybe other people will talk about that as well. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks so much, Kat. We'll go to Jill and then Professor Dragan, and then we'll have a conversation, and you would definitely be able to share some of the information that you have on students, on university students. I think that's important. So Jill, thank you and welcome. We appreciate that you're with us today, and we'd like you, we know that you've done quite a bit of work in the HIV/AIDS sector and probably quite a bit now. We'd like you to give us a kind of overview, probably lessons learned and some of the suggestions on a way forward. Welcome, Jill.
Okay, thank you, Hannah Hancock, and I'm a scientist. I work on sexual reproductive health and rights and person with disabilities. So I'm very happy that there was already a speaker that mentioned the subject. So I don't need to introduce disability so much at this point. But yeah, the topic that have dedicated my life to, I would say, is something that is usually silent. And even before the COVID epidemic, it was a topic that needed specific advocacy and research in terms of bringing it out of its silence. So if I may say something for before and then during the COVID epidemic and come to lessons learned. So if I look 20 years back, because that's kind of about where my starting point is with this topic, we really had NGOs and community members bringing to our attention that there are also people with disabilities who are infected with HIV. And if you remember back that time, that was around about the time where we're talking about ARVs exists, and here you start seeing the parallels probably, but ARVs are not available for countries like the one I'm living in, South Africa. And slowly over the years, and obviously that access got there, and South Africa has now one of the biggest ARV programs in the world. But in the midst of this heated discussion, and probably the biggest response before COVID to a health crisis, there were people with disabilities, and we didn't even want to believe that they have sex, that they can be infected with HIV. So what if we had to come together here was research, advocacy, and NGOs. And over a period of time, and that's research that I've been involved with, we really had to debunk, of course, the myths. Persons with disabilities are just like anybody else and can also have a sexual partner. However, actually the data that we have today show that they're more likely to be infected in HIV in our part of the world. And that they are, at least particular women with disability, 2 times more likely to be exposed to gender-based violence. And that is one of the intimate partner violence, sorry, and that is one of the risk factors of HIV. But they're also exposed to other risk factors. Increased poverty, for instance. We have enough data to show that those families are much poorer than families without persons with disabilities, and that at the same time they have greater costs. That people with disabilities can also have multiple partners. But what's interesting for this conversation here, young people with disabilities are not all having the same access to schools as people with learners without disabilities. They are more likely to be isolated at home. And here again are the parallels that come to the COVID epidemic. We know everybody had to experience what is it like to be out of school or not having access to the same way. We just had the previous speaker telling us about the digital divide. Then obviously there have been some pilot projects, and again, they're coming from either community NGOs or sometimes from researchers that develop an intervention more rigorous. And similar in the COVID epidemic, again, very little attention paid to persons with disabilities. That was already raised by a previous speaker. I think very quickly, around about September last year, there was a report coming out on disability and COVID-19, and it tells you all the usual things, but exacerbated. So the increased poverty, the increased isolation, the having in South Africa, some people have, for instance, access to the disability grant, but then it gets shared now amongst more family members who are coming home from the cities. So there was quite a bit of attention to that in that particular report, as well as to the denial of healthcare access, also related to COVID. What was completely silent again, and I felt really 20 years thrown back, was the sexual reproductive health and rights of persons with disabilities. So because of that, we have one specific project that we call the Forgotten Agenda. And another one is called the Breaking Silence. And that's why Zane invited me, where we're trying to look at that. What is this other thing that particular young people and women with disabilities may experience that's around sexual reproductive health? And our studies are ongoing. So what I'm saying now is a little bit more informal, the first tapping in and reports, conversations that we have with people in the field. And what seems to happen is that even in this space, the sexual reproductive health violations of young people with disabilities have rather increased. So people are staying at home, they are isolated, but perpetrators are also often the ones in the home. Sometimes that may be intentionally, sometimes it is unintentionally. Sometimes it has something to do with that the caregiver themselves can't speak the language of the learner, the person, like a deaf person, for instance. And that again links to how our schools are usually built, which a lot of them are special schools that are actually catering for learners with disabilities. They are not mainstream schools. They should be, but they're not. So we have in this pandemic, we have experienced that these learners have gone home far away. Now, you're speaking about the digital divide. There's 2 problems here. First of all, I told you already, there's an increased poverty in those families. The likelihood that these type of learners have access to internet and all the technology that they should have, like we having right now, is already smaller. But even if we look what we have right now, even that is not necessarily accessible. I mean, educators in these schools that caters for learners with disability had to learn over the years, like how to adapt material. They speak for sign language. They have facilities to provide things in Braille. They have maybe pictures that are making information easier to understand for intellectual disabled people. They have the space to wheel around a wheelchair, which a home in the rural area doesn't necessarily have. So they have therapists there that are crucial for, we had the case of a person with an autistic spectrum. So these things have fallen away. And with that, have a lot of support structures has fallen away. What I can say, you asked me also about to speak about the vaccine. I mean, in South Africa, we don't have enough vaccines yet, and we struggle with it. But from our experience with HIV, we actually have a very good system to roll it out. We have mobile clinics. We know that from TB and HIV. We have community responses that have kicked in particular to support families that have people with disabilities with food, with going in and maybe addressing some kind of issues. We have that system, but we do not actually have the vaccines to for our people. And I think one of the other speakers was saying that children lack touch and want a touch. I would say our learners with disabilities need touch. It is essential to their learning as much as it is to small children. In this case, how does a teacher provide safely a learning environment to them? You cannot wear a mask because the person, their learners are deaf. You need actually to allow them to read your lips. Maybe you can put in a special mask, okay, that is see-through. But you have to have the idea and the material to do that. Maybe your learners maybe you have blind learners, you need to lead them from A to B by touching them. So these teachers, educators, and therapists and social workers that have to cater for those learners with disabilities, they should actually be the first in line to get the vaccine. Apart from that, maybe learners should also get that. But they really do not always have the option to do social distancing, mask wearing, and even hand washing. You know, you have someone with a more severe disability where maybe the saliva is going not where it necessarily is supposed to. That person touches themselves within 5 minutes that you have all washed your hands. It isn't always possible for these people, so they need a specific support from us. And I think the word there for me is balance. And back in the HIV epidemic, we had to balance the risk of HIV infection, particularly in the time when we didn't understand it as well as we do today. That it's actually your HIV status is a confidential matter, and that there might be a risk for someone else to get HIV, that people have a right to be included and not excluded based on their status. Other people had fears about how could they get infected. Though over time, information, more science and research brought more clarity, but also more community activism, showing that inclusion, integration, interaction is important, and that there needs to be a balance between disease prevention and social inclusion. And I think I'll close there for now.
Thank you. Thank you. That was quite thorough. Thank you very much, Jill. So now we come to Professor Dragan, and what I wanted with this was, as we talk about the trauma and the challenges, we also want to know what are the opportunities. And what Professor has done is a wonderful project called Films in Schools, and looking at a creative way in which we can engage with young people. So welcome, Professor. We have your slides, and as soon as you're ready, Justine will be ready.
First of all, thank you, Firdaus. Congratulations for one more lovely event. You are successful in everything you are doing. And at the same time, I congratulate to my colleagues, starting with the youngest among us, who inspired me to talk about children more than I'm oriented to talk to the youngsters. So as blessed among ladies, let me be efficient, not much time left. I really believe that children deserve more and that media are not doing their job on the right way. First of all, my position, as Firdaus knows, for decades that we are late with media education, with literacy, media literacy. It's a new language. We are living in technological time with plenty of devices, but we don't know how to use them wisely, how to find the better side of all those technological advancement. Cinema is the oldest among media, and when I use the expression cinema, it means all other media. We used to say film literacy, but it's media literacy too. This is a very special speech. As I told, it's a new language like Chinese, and we have to learn about the grammar, how to use the language, how to express themselves. Unfortunately, our children are meeting many of teachers which are not literate in media sense. In fact, there are very few schools which are having curriculums, programs about media literacy. If yes, it's a question of very expensive schools, those in which rich people send their sons and daughters. At the same time, we have to know that media are integral part of daily life of our children, of my children, and my granddaughters, and every children in the world. So they can't live without media, without all those contents available on their different kind of devices. Probably nobody is surprised that most of television and film and media viewers are children and young people, teenagers. They are making more than 75%, but majority of them don't know anything about criteria, what they watch, because programs are not made for them, then about them. What we need to do, how to influence those who are producing programs for children? And what about different children? I was happy to listen my colleagues about those with children with special needs. Where are they in the politics, in the program politics of our channels, of our media? Do we really know, do we really understand them? What we are offering to them? Can we satisfy? Are we underestimating their capacities or overestimating our capacities? How really to empower children through viewing media programs to be better and to contribute to their life, their efficient life, their happy life. We used to say, old professor, as I am, one emeritus, what means very old professor, dinosaurs. we have to relate to what is really touching children, telling the stories from the everyday life, being entertaining, informative, interesting, have imagination, offer them a kind of heroes they can identify with, not imported artificial heroes, and most of all, involve them in the programs, letting them to participate. They can learn from us, they can listen to us, even they can remember, but if they participate, they are in. And more, ask them to talk to us. Give them opportunity, as Firdaus did today, to start discussion, to give us orientation, because they are looking for orientation. Something which is reflecting their own point of view, what children's and students' reality is. Talking to them seriously, with respect. They are children by the age, but in many situations they are elder and more wise than we are. Don't forget that children are coming in front of teachers with much more media experience, screen experience than they ever had in their life. So in many situations, we don't know who is a real student and who is the teacher. Then other things, what the teacher are telling to the students. Strange stories, plenty of theories, plenty of unuseful advices. Children like happy stories, stories with happy ending, or with the hope at the end. They like jokes, but not stupid jokes, or not too serious jokes, not able to understand them. Next one. Okay. We know how many questions, how many why they are posing from the childhood, from the first year till the major years, when they are leaving our families. Are we responding to them? Do we have patience for them? Do we give them a real chance to understand the life around them? Why we are hiding many issues? Why we don't talk about family problems in front of them? About political issues? About COVID? Do they know really what's happening with the COVID today? What is this disaster? We have to tell them about big failure of media in this unexpected, let's say unexpected situation. We should inform them. We should respect them. Even we should ask them for advice, how to do that. That's why we need media literacy in the schools. We need the teachers prepared to teach on efficient and simple way what the media are and how to use the media. And most of all, to talk about criteria. What could be good, what could be bad, what could be for certain age, for certain group, what could be for the other. But without prejudices, with open mind, learning from them. It's a kind of common learning. Teachers have to learn about efficiency, how to deal with new technologies. What we need is how they see and how they would like us to use and to participate with them in using those new technologies. Next, please. Okay, we are on the end. as you can know, everything could be interesting for them. If we present them this on the right way, if they can understand it. Problem is that editors, filmmakers are making content stories about children, not for children. It must be changed. It must be something which is creative on their own way, with this hook. They call this something is happening, something we can't explain, we can't express, but it's there, we feel it, and we trust in this. Trust is the most important. So we have to trust to our children, we have to trust. In fact, they need, they deserve more of us, including media literacy. That's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And this is so important in how do we communicate these big issues. And so I want, Justine, if we can just show quickly the Wazi animation. We've done a new one, Cello, which has to do with vaccination. So I think you would like this.
Rise and shine, ilangali balele. Rise and shine, lijaji lisabi ila.
Hello, friends. Do you know that the vaccine rollout has begun? Please tell your elders that they should register for the vaccine. Vaccines are now available for everyone over 60 years, and soon it will be available for everyone below 60 years. The more people get vaccinated, the better it will be for everyone. But even if you are vaccinated, you must still follow all the COVID-19 rules. Musa, what are the COVID-19 rules?
Sanitize, wear a mask, and social distancing.
Friends, I'm so excited. Gogo got vaccinated today.
Yay! Yippee! But I still remember to put my mask on and social distancing and sanitize when I visit Gogo, so we can all be safe from COVID-19.
So we thought we would share, we thought we would share the animation on the vaccines, as we know we're very concerned. And Kat, if you want to have a last word about just bringing it together around the, you were talking about university students who are also struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there's not much time, but I did want to just share that what we're talking about in relation to young people, I think is true for learners of all ages. And I work at the university with both undergraduate and graduate students, American students and international students. And we've seen some of these same issues that we're talking about, you know, mental health. The stigma of seeking out mental health counseling is still very real here in the United States and among international students as well. But we've been offering a lot of outreach through online support groups and counseling services, specifically targeting students from international student groups and other student groups. Also, we had an international student task force that worked with the community and raised $300,000 to assist students during the pandemic. And this was distributed to over 300 students at Ohio University. These were donations from people in the community, churches. We also had a food pantry that started up. We had rising food insecurity among students on campus. And so we had a food pantry in our office as well as the university center. But yeah, just a lot of attention to the needs of all of our students is really important, and recognizing that the social isolation and loneliness, distance from family, health concerns, lack of employment and internship opportunities, students really struggling with the difficulty of online learning. I think all of this has been really exacerbated during the pandemic, as well as the administration policies around immigration, fears of deportation, all of that has really risen during this time. And I also want to say that here in the United States, it's been kind of the perfect storm, because not only are we dealing with the COVID pandemic and all of the mental health challenges and psychosocial challenges, but we are also facing a reckoning around racism and police brutality and violence in the United States. We've also seen a rise in substance use disorders, overdose, and also a rise in hate crimes, anti-Asian hate crimes, anti-Black hate crimes, domestic violence, abuse and neglect, gender-based violence. So this has been a real time of reckoning around all of our social inequalities, and the need to really focus on investing in human interactions, and the need for us to organize as communities. And I think, we've really been facing a lot of that here in the United States. And I think other countries like South Africa and India are also facing some of these challenges as well. So yeah, I appreciate you giving me another chance to speak about this. And I think we could have another conversation in another F show just about those topics. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. But I do want my young learner to come back. So usually when we end the show, it's called the F show, and the F is for my name, Firdaus, but it could be the F for anything else. So I'd like to ask you all to think about, what does F mean to you? F for me, I keep saying every week, means freedom. So I'm going to start with a young learner. What is F for you?
I think it would mean fun. The session was very fun to hear everyone's thoughts and to hear what everyone has said and shared, especially with like the students or children who are suffering with like autism and things like that. It's very nice to be aware of things like that. Not many people are aware of it, and not many people are talking about that certain topic.
Thank you. Hello, what is F for you?
Fantastic. The show has been fantastic. You are fantastic, Firdaus, and the team that you've had is fantastic. I especially liked everyone. It was so enlightening. Nosheen, was it the lady that spoke? She really spoke about what's happening now at school. We have so much of challenges, shortage of teachers, short-staffed, learners who are going through so much of challenges. And I loved all of them. The gentleman towards the end, I will take you up on the challenge of having teachers speak about the drama. But I loved what he said, that we should take the curriculum and make it exciting for the child, involve the child in it. Because so often we are so pressurized in getting that curriculum covered and ensuring that all the topics are covered, not realizing that we just doing the academics and not taking into consideration involving the child as in part of the curriculum. So I loved that. Thank you very much, Firdaus, for inviting us. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Nosheen, what does F mean for you?
Fabulous.
Fabulous.
This program was just fabulous. Thank you. I just want to say one thing, Firdaus, that Wazi it was beautiful. My daughter that is disabled, Laika, is going to love it. We underestimate our children that have disabilities and technology, but they love it to bits. Thank you, Firdaus, and thank you to every other speaker here this evening.
Jill, F4?
This is so difficult. I take forward then.
Forward, yay.
You had taken freedom, so I can't take that anymore. Forward is I learn the most from the communities that we study and work with, and from this panel here as well. And those people, and including yourself, will give us an idea on how we can do things better. So think forward.
Thank you. Professor Dragan, F is for?
As always, I am enjoying in your shows. And it was a big pleasure to listen to my two ladies. my colleagues. I learned so much. It was inspiring. And I know that everyone who participated this will do something else, some additional effort to support our children, our youngsters, which are simply lost if we don't change our approach to their childhood, how we teach them, how we advise them, how we guide them, how we orientate them, involving them, as I told. Thank you very much, lady, to notice this is the best way. I am a stage and film director, and I know what means put children in front of audience, in front of camera, or in front of class. That's self-confirmation. That's how we learn to present ourselves, and that's how we learn to listen to our voices, and how to see us as the others are seeing us. That's it.
Thank you. And Kat, F is for?
For me, F is for feminism. It's about centering, the voices of people who are often marginalized and paying attention to power and the dynamics of power. And that's what I think of when I hear the F word. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. I wish you well. I thank you for your time and hope to see you next week when we cover some more interesting topics. And some of the ideas that come out of this conversation, definitely, Kat, we will take on to the next weeks. Thank you and good night, everybody. Goodbye, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye.